Good evening. It is the face-off Friday night. I have a full table. And while ago, before I came to the show, I just had in my mind a conspiracy to make them sing. And I wouldn't sing. I have Chaz Romshana on the extreme shiny head. Welcome, Chaz.
The Almighty God is great.
Yes, right next to him is Morrison Ruaka Kamba. Welcome.
Thank you.
I was at a session this morning and people alternately called him either doctor or honorable. And he didn't object to either. He actually gleefully took them in.
No, I said honorary.
And I have David Pukol.
And he was a minister of state in the other leaked cabinet.
Which one? Who?
Ropakam.
No, I didn't see the ministers of state in the leaked cabinet. I only saw the full ministers.
So
Actually, it is not leaked.
Viewers.
Good evening, David. The cabinet wasn't leaked, actually. It didn't exist.
You have become a photo.
Well, Ofono Pondo is my friend. And Richard Baguma, welcome.
A good evening to you viewers, and it's 34 years ago today.
And Richard was the minister for what? Wasn't he a state minister in the leaked government?
Actually, I have had the opportunity to be given a ministerial position, not in the Uganda government, but in another government, which I didn't take.
In
and,
Makerere?
and there is evidence on the table.
Right, viewers. It is 34 years since the fellows went and attacked a government of Uganda facility, and were not charged for treason for it, and subsequently became government, and it has been legitimized. I have had arguments over and over again, and every time that I am told that 20 how many men attacked Kabamba, there is a 20-something men, and they say that they are the ones that started. I always ask, what had happened to the whole army that had been in Fronasa and that had been kept being recruited during the UNLA days of liberation? Where had they gone? But of course, these war stories are the same stories that we've read. We've read of Shaka Zulu. He had a tail. He was a giant of a man. We've read of Napoleon. He was born away from his country, and he came and attacked. There are always valiant stories of giants of men, and I'm not going into those. But I'm touching a component that those men are doing. The men gathered in Moroto today have also taken it upon themselves to look at agriculture in this country and say, wait a minute. We think that over the years, 29?
Only. You must add only.
Agriculture in this country is going to the dogs, or are the dogs coming to agriculture? Our production is going down, according to the stats that have been availed, while we are able to cater for our food market. Is it called Mwene Mushanga, or formerly at NADS, says that actually our biggest problem is distribution. That you will have food in Ntungamo, and then you will have people in Soroti dying of hunger at a particular time. But all those things, NADS, as a component of the Plan for Modernization of Agriculture and a subcomponent of the Poverty Eradication Action Plan, a very detailed, sometimes mouthful concept, was supposed to roll out advisory services and other technical services and roll out. We loaded it with a lot more, and the questions have come. NADS failed. And at political rallies, mark that, at political rallies, His Excellency the President would call out and say, in this whole area among you who benefited from NADS, and the chorus would always come, not me, no one. And the president said NADS was really shabby. They were doing a pathetic job. He has disbanded it, I think, about 3 times, and hasn't quite disbanded it, because today I learned that it actually still exists and it hasn't been disbanded. I'll start with Morrison. Morrison trades in agriculture, or writes about it. One of those or thereabouts. He's been secretary of the Uganda Farmers Union. Is it Uganda Farmers Union?
No, I was not a party, really. But I worked at the Uganda National Farmers Federation as a research chief.
Yes, I love the chief. And he's been engaged at that level, and I see him passionate several times about agriculture. Morrison, tell me the move of taking, I know that you and I and David were at a debate where this was fairly discussed this morning, and several views came through, and sometimes I'll be at pains not to say what was said there. But tell me, the entry of the army into agriculture, what happens to NADS and the whole motif that built the concept of NADS, and with a back view at PMA?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that it was on the 7th of July 2014, Cabinet under a minute number 186 approved the deployment of the UPDF to backstop or to support NADS operations.
Wasn't that in retrospect?
Not in retrospect.
They were already deployed there. The president had deployed there.
No, not at all. They were not yet
I had
deployed.
been at Kapeka, where the president had rolled out Jerusalem Saleh, and Jerusalem Saleh was already working with farmers on, was it maize and stuff?
No,
like
but I mean, remember General Saleh is a presidential advisor on defense-related issues, and like I mentioned today morning, you see, food security is the first line of national security. If we are to have a comprehensive peace and security, then food security is really the first line. And any nation state without food is actually a very insecure country, is at a state of collapse. And I think today morning we heard that for countries like Russia, they even moved to have what you call food vaults. They don't have silos. They have food vaults, cereal vaults that can take that country for 10 years. And like we mentioned also, is that in Kenya, if food prices, for instance, the prices of ugali moved by just 5 percentage points, you would actually have, sorry about this. We would have, if it happened in Kenya, we would have a crisis. We would have people on the streets. So the move to have UPDF, first of all, involved in agriculture was because of the frailty. And I want to agree with you, was because of frailty of extension services in the country, was because since NADS Act in 2001, factor productivity for agriculture was at 7.9%, and it declined, to 1.3%. And when the president was moving around, farmers were complaining, that services were not reaching them. But what the country needs to know is that UPDF is not going to be doing agronomy and doing animal husbandry or pursuing that kind of technical advisory. The cardinal role of the UPDF is going to be, first of all, logistics, to make sure that farm inputs are moved from research stations or where they are produced to reach the farmers cost effectively. But also too is that the UPDF will be involved in monitoring the performance of NADS. That even if we had a single spine system, so these are technocrats in the Ministry of Agriculture, if they are deployed in Chisoro to make sure that they can give advice to farmers, one of the key roles of UPDF officers who are deployed at sub-county would be to be like, the eyes to make sure that these extension workers, are not only taking time in Premier League and peri-urban life, but they are actually reaching farmers and giving them advice. So it's really not going to be, advisory in terms of science. And this is why, even for us at the Agency for Transformation, said that if the UPDF is to backstop real advisory, real science, then they may need something like 15 years to be retooled in that.
Morrison, let me ask.
Yeah.
Is the UPDF coming in because of an institutional failure at Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry, and blah, blah, blah? The name is long, MAIF, or is it coming in for a failure at institutional level at NADS? Which of the two, or both?
I really think it's both, because if you look at the agricultural policy in this country, I think it has been a broken brick where you have so many institutions that have had competing mandates.
They are coming in.
So there has been a problem really of governance in agricultural sector.
Okay.
I don't want to say that the silver bullet is really going to be UPDF, but UPDF is coming in when there is a crisis to make sure
I
that
need
we
to.
step up
I
and
need to
get out of the
understand.
ditch.
I need to understand this before I bring in the others. If they are coming in because of institutional failure at both the ministry and at NADS as an implementing agency, what magic does the green uniform bring to the sector? That the whole conception and the ministry...
Now there is a national agriculture policy, which was never there before. And I think to get out of the crisis, to make sure that farmers have the inputs they need, soldiers, I think, using their method of command and control, are able, because there was a pilot in Nakaseka and all those places, they used less money to make sure that they supply the inputs. And one of the reasons that the president gave was that after realizing that around 60% of the entire NADS budget was being spent on recurrent expenditure at the headquarters, and less than 40% was reaching the farmer.
You see, Morrison, before I ask David to come in, I think that also has totally been misconstrued.
Why?
You need to understand what advisory and technical services are. Those are not cuttings of muhogo and seedlings of beans.
I have clearly mentioned that.
And there is no way that you would expect that inputs would be more than the technical services at this point.
No, absolutely not. Because you see the single spine system, which is the technocratic extension system, and the people recruited by MAIF. Okay, these are veterinary doctors, these are agronomists who will be teaching farmers, how to identify diseases, how to treat diseases, how to, treat animals, how to, do breeding.
We were there and we failed and then went to NADS.
Did you see? So that's no, because you see, when that single spine system was there, agriculture, that's the point I made, agriculture growth factor productivity was at 7.9%. With NADS, it reduced 1.3. So meaning that that system before was performing at a much higher level than what we saw with NADS.
I'll hold you there.
And the problem was that NADS was purely demand-driven, private sector-led, and not government-driven.
David.
Indeed, private sector-led, and it's laughable. It's laughable because let's lift this debate globally. When you look at the entire world, as we speak today, because food security is an issue in the world, and so it is in our own homes. So when you look at globally, you look at 60% of the entire arable land in the whole world is in Africa, cultivable land. Now, which means then Africa holds the future of the world. Yet actually it is Africa again which imports food up to $35 billion per year from other areas which don't have arable land. That's the crisis. When you come to East Africa, you find that Uganda, where we are, which we are discussing again, 46% of the entire arable land in East Africa is found in Uganda. Now, therefore, agriculture should have been a comparative advantage of Uganda in this region as a food basket. Now, the tragedy we are dealing with now, maybe what President Museveni and his handlers are grappling with, actually fumbling with now, is the fact that, the unpleasant fact that under the NRM period, although the agriculture has remained the mainstay of up to about 85% of our population, or in terms of family households, rely on agriculture, employing up to about 73% of the labor force. You find that this sector today, its contribution to the GDP, the growth of the economy, is only 21%. Now, how can so many people be made to produce so little, to contribute so less in the overall economy? So the exclusionist policies of this government have succeeded to exclude a majority of people because from the economy, because they have withheld investments in agriculture to less than 5% for the last 20 years or so or more. So When you don't
David,
invest,
haven't we actually hit 7%?
what does that mean? I'm talking about trends in the last 20 years. So yes. So when you put the average, and when you withhold investments in that sector, where many people are, and then you transfer the wealth from the majority of the rural folk to these people who are in telecoms, who are in banks, who are in the service industry, because you are removing taxpayers' money and then giving 10 people in my parish when it first began, Banobagawale. Now, how can the wealth of 10 in my parish become the wealth, the wealth of all? Abarata kere, abarata dada, you know? So, which school did you go to? That the wealth of 10 people become abarata kere, you know, abarata dadang, you know, that Bonaga Gawale. So besides,
I hear you said dang in it.
Besides the sheer lies in this thing, and I'm saying actually NADS is too deformed to be reformed. That's the point I'm making.
Okay.
Because it is
David, hold there. If you say NADS is actually too deformed to be reformed,
and I want to explain
you do not differ with the head of state. And the head of state says, well, NADS has a problem, and it is problematic. So we are moving this component and bringing in the forces to come and correct what is wrong.
That's the point I'm explaining now.
Aren't you there with him?
Now, this is deformed by who? Because it has now become a trend. 201 when it began, okay? Of course, they are successful, they are succeeding programs, they are preceding programs. In Tandikwa, Wanabagawale, name these things, modernization of agriculture. Each time it is a failure, you pack aside and then come with a new cliché. And then you come with a new cliché, you know, to attract people. But it has become a trend. A year preceding election, the president always comes and says it is a failure. Before election is around the corner, when the clouds are forming, and the weatherman's report says the rain is about to come and the elections are here. So if you see 206 also, 205, if you see 210, 211,
David, I need to understand.
Let me now
what
tell you the defects.
What is wrong with the army now?
The defects, first of all, you undermine the pooling of resources by farmers through their cooperatives to address issues of production, issues of marketing, so that they can access distant markets and get good prices, issues of transportation, issues of storage, issues of credit. Because in the cooperative, you would get part of your profits now, and part is kept by the cooperative society as part of your input for the next season, and also in terms of storage. Now, when you come and dismantle that, including dismantling cooperative bank, you have actually taken most of the rural economy, family economies with you. And now, then you have exposed our farmers to scrupulous middlemen. I wish they were even middle women, but middlemen are terrible. The off-gate prices are completely depressed. And the farmer who's toiling, waiting for 4 months, 5 months for his crop to get ready, who's braising snakes, dew in the morning, rain, and so forth, does not get good returns for their produce. Instead, when I heard last time, the big man's daughter was one of those exporting maize
grain
without a maize garden. Now,
well,
this
you
is
don't
exactly
have to have a maize garden to export.
I don't know which big man. But the point I'm making here is that even a store is rehabilitated for her in Nakawa, okay? And transportation under
the one you're talking about, I know.
Under intervention, strategic intervention, even the
you see, David, I've never differed with that.
Now,
for me, I only differ with the fact that we have failed to sustain it. If they put David Pulkol, Romshana, Ruakakamba there, and it was able to spur the markets,
yes,
and Kivazo would be able to sell to Ruakakamba and it becomes marketable. It doesn't matter who finally sells it.
It doesn't matter. In Teso today, because of this middleman, a lot of potatoes. Now, middlemen come and say to take my potatoes to Nakawa,
I'll hold you,
on
David,
credit. And then afterwards they say Abosata Kere, that they all got rotten. So they come with stories.
Doesn't that sound like Bonaba Gagawale?
No, there's a new cooperative now under the NRM called Abosata Kere.
I'll hold you there. Richard,
they're all rotten.
I was talking to an old man. One I told you just before when you asked for 90-year-olds. And he always puzzles and marvels about this generation. He says when he grew up, there would be community dips for cows. and they'll be governed by the single spine agricultural officers at counties or districts. They would say, on this day we are whipping our cows to the deep. And there would be controlled pest control. There would be all manner of extension services. And he says that delivered for them at his time. And he says this day, when you and I and everyone have been allowed to do privately lead agriculture, everything has fallen apart. And he says, what went wrong? Is that what the UPDF is addressing? To go back to a single spine agriculture setting, and then you have the army to whip you like the kiboko in the coffee?
There are 2 weeks of
You
training.
see, I'm enjoying a product of agriculture. This is coffee. This is locally grown coffee. I've also had the opportunity.
I suppose we don't import coffee. I suppose.
I've also had the opportunity
Okay, we actually do. Nescafe.
to live in countries outside here, which are famed for agricultural output. In those 2 countries, and I can talk about them, one is Norway, one is Switzerland. I've lived there, and I've interested myself, particularly in the cows business, I think just because of my background. Now, agriculture
I'd be surprised if you did coffee.
agriculture in those countries is actually subsidized.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't understand the problem with having subsidy in whatever form. But I also want to agree with David. Their land is not that arable. So it's not about arability of land. They produce much more than they need. They actually dump here. So governments there subsidize agriculture. It's not about the ability of agriculturists to make profit, to produce profitably. They don't. And 2, they are not. It's not arable. Their land, but they grow and have more, and they even send to us. Are there things to learn from there? Are we misdiagonizing our problem? If we want to keep it peasant-based, if we want to, I mean, we need to ask ourselves. Then 2 or 3, food is a security thing, food security. But you see, in the long term, it's not just about food security. It's about nutrition security. So it goes beyond food, just food. And we know it's about production, it's about distribution, it's about storage, it's about preservation, but it's also about preparation and consumption. So I think there is a reasonable misdiagnosis of the challenge that we face, especially by us, the elite. The other one for me is that food is also an instrument of diplomacy. So you see, the peasant approach, the peasant diagnosis of the problem. Somebody talked about militarizing agriculture because of the UPDF came on, and a lot of them are retired officers. And I started thinking, the most frequent panelists on Chibazo's show, this show, are former intelligence officers. So would I be fair to say, current, I don't know whether they are still current anyway. Would I be fair to say that you have intelligencized the show?
Okay, I hadn't thought about
Yeah,
that.
but you see that's why I keep saying that we need to think a little above the
course we're doing analysis.
pedestrian arguments that we land around every day. And so I think agricultural management is way beyond these pedestrian aspects that we pick, but that are nice.
You see,
are
Richard,
nice to
hold
talk
on,
about.
Hold
Yes.
on here, Richard. This morning, with quick observations. For me, I don't care if the UPDF is engaged in agriculture. I actually would want them to be more engaged, because if you do not have war, if you do not have borders threatened, you have redundant labor in the UPDF. I would like them to engage, like the prisons engage. But the question of agricultural policy, the question of institutional direction should be clearly mandated, and we have a focus. Strategic direction. What is our strategic direction as a country in agriculture? The interventions by the UPDF may be quick fixes, But is that the strategic direction we want to go? That agriculture should be handled by the Ministry of Defense. Therefore, close my if, move it and let it be a function of the Ministry of Defense and hold it as part of your strand that this is how we will do it. Because this is not about farming. This is not about UPDF having a garden of beans, a garden of maize.
Like prison farm.
Yes. No, it's the bigger picture. It's thinking this country. Do I need mangoes? Do I need oranges? Do I have the roads? Do I have the silos? Do I have the things that will spur my agriculture to take me to that level? Do I have the interventions, be them underhand like the WTO doesn't want, but all other big players do?
But you see, you asked a very high-level question, and then you made it pedestrian by bringing the questions, close my if, go to defense, and that's where we kill it. That's where we move from that level, and we come back to this, what I will keep calling pedestrian level. That we start even talking about closing my if. Should even that be
No, I mean,
an issue?
if strategically we've decided
That involvement, that a tactical involvement of one sector of society means the ministry should be closed elsewhere.
Richard,
I think
it has happened in Japan. Japan, after the First World War, decided that all companies that were manufacturing arms would be moved and they manufacture cars. They were properties of the defense in Japan, Mitsubishi. Toyota subsequently came off the hands of Mitsubishi. But Mitsubishi, the largest of them, decided to go into manufacturing of vehicles, and they were supported. The defense was doing that. And they gave themselves years. They said after 50 years, we'll win these off and sell them to the likes of you and I.
Yeah, but does that take away the mandate from the ministries? You see, that's the, for me, that's the misdiagnosis. That, and oftentimes it is dishonest. Because many of the times we know the truth.
Yes, but briefly, I need to take a break.
Yeah, but yes, oftentimes for our short-term or emotional reasons, we take a tangential misdiagnosis of the problem. And that will not, the UPDF will be involved, the police will be involved, and we shall still debate. And that is where the challenge for me comes from. That you do not see an honest but also objective analysis or diagnosis of what the problem could be.
Viewers, I'll take a break. When I return from the break, I'll hear from Charles Wamshana. And there are things at the table that keep coming in. This morning, someone was talking about 8 million tons of maize seeds distributed. And quickly, for me, it didn't mean 8 million tons of seeds distributed. It said, okay, 8 million tons of maize seeds distributed. What is the resultant effect? How many million tons of corn produced? Where did you store it? Where did you procure the seeds? Where did you sell it? What was the impact on the market? What was the impact on our forex finally? Because we couldn't consume that product if it was there. Don't go away.